For millions of years, the war between the Autobots and Decepticons consumed entire worlds, shattered civilizations, and pushed the Transformers to the edge of extinction. What began as a revolution against corruption evolved into one of the most catastrophic conflicts in science fiction history. A war so massive that even Cybertron itself could not survive it. This is the brutal scale of the Cybertronian War. Long before the first shot was fired, Cybertron was already dying. To outsiders, Cybertron looked like the greatest machine civilization ever created. Towering metallic cities stretched across the planet. Massive engines powered entire continents. Advanced technology allowed the Cybertronians to reshape matter itself. They were immortal mechanical beings capable of transforming into vehicles, weapons, and war machines. But beneath that shining surface was a broken society. In many versions of Transformers lore, especially the IDW continuity and parts of the Align continuity, Cybertron operated under a brutal caste system known as functionalism. A Transformer's alternate mode determined their role in society. If you transformed into construction equipment, you became labor. If you transformed into transport vehicles, you became a worker. If you possessed a powerful combat form, you became military. Freedom barely existed. The powerful controlled energon distribution, political influence, and military authority. Entire groups of Cybertronians were trapped in meaningless labor for millions of years while the elite prospered in towering cities like Iacon. And deep beneath Cybertron's surface, anger was growing. One of those angry workers was a gladiator named Megatron. Before he became the infamous leader of the Decepticons, Megatron was something very different. In several continuities, he began as a miner, a laborer forced into the harshest conditions on Cybertron. Eventually, he became a gladiator in the underground Kaon arenas, fighting for survival while Cybertron's elite watched from above. But Megatron was more than a fighter. He was intelligent, charismatic, dangerous. He studied Cybertron's history and realized something horrifying. The system itself was corrupt. The Senate protected the powerful while millions suffered beneath them. Cybertron was not a utopia. It was an empire built on oppression. At first, Megatron's movement was not entirely evil. That is what makes the Cybertronian War so fascinating. The Decepticons did not begin as conquerors. They began as revolutionaries. Workers, miners, outcasts, and soldiers rallied behind Megatron because he promised change. He promised freedom from the caste system. He promised equality. He promised to tear down the corrupt government that controlled Cybertron. And for a time, many believed him. Even Orion Pax, the Transformer who would later become Optimus Prime, sympathized with parts of Megatron's ideology. Orion believed Cybertron needed reform. But unlike Megatron, he still believed peace was possible. Megatron did not. As tensions escalated, peaceful reform collapsed into violence. Then the war began, and once it started, it never truly stopped. The Cybertronian War was not a normal conflict. It was not fought for years or decades. It lasted for millions of years. Imagine a war so long that entire generations forget why it even started. A conflict so massive that entire cities become permanent battlefields. A civilization so consumed by violence that war becomes its natural state. That was Cybertron. The scale of the conflict became almost unimaginable. Entire planetary regions were transformed into wastelands. Towering metallic cities were annihilated by orbital bombardments. Massive titans marched across the surface like mechanical gods, leveling anything in their path. Countless Cybertronians died faster than they could be rebuilt. The Autobots and Decepticons were no longer fighting for ideology. They were fighting for survival, and the Decepticons quickly gained the advantage. One of the greatest misconceptions about Transformers lore is that the Autobots and Decepticons were evenly matched. They were not. In most continuities, the Decepticons heavily outnumbered the Autobots. Megatron's forces were larger, more aggressive, and far more militarized. Entire armies rallied behind him. Colonies were conquered. Neutral worlds were absorbed into the Decepticon war machine. Meanwhile, the Autobots struggled to survive. Under Optimus Prime, the Autobots fought defensively. They protected civilians, evacuated survivors, and attempted to preserve what remained of Cybertronian civilization. But morality came with a cost. The Autobots could not match the brutality of Decepticon warfare, and Megatron understood that. The Decepticons embraced escalation. They created weapons designed not just to win battles, but to erase worlds. One of the most terrifying examples was the rise of the Phase Sixers. Phase Sixers were not ordinary soldiers. They were living extinction events. Transformers like Six-Shot and Overlord were deployed during the final phases of planetary conquest. Once they arrived, resistance was considered hopeless. Entire worlds fell beneath their assaults. Cities vanished. Populations were exterminated. They were not warriors. They were apocalyptic weapons. And yet even Phase Sixers were only a small part of the horror. As the war dragged on, both factions became increasingly desperate. Ancient relics were rediscovered. Forbidden technologies were unleashed. Experiments pushed Cybertronian science into terrifying territory. Shockwave became one of the darkest symbols of this era. Cold, emotionless, and obsessed with logic, Shockwave abandoned morality entirely. Across multiple continuities, he conducted horrifying experiments on living transformers, manipulated galactic events, and pursued scientific advancement regardless of the consequences. To Shockwave, suffering was irrelevant. Only logic mattered. And in many ways, that mindset reflected what the war itself had become. Because over time, the Cybertronian War stopped being about justice or freedom. It became industrialized annihilation. The environmental destruction alone was catastrophic. Cybertron's energon reserves began collapsing beneath the endless warfare. Entire regions of the planet became lifeless metallic deserts. Supply chains failed. Infrastructure crumbled. The planet itself started dying. This created one of the darkest realities in Transformers lore. The Transformers were slowly driving their own species toward extinction. The Autobots understood this too late. By the final stages of the war, Cybertron was barely recognizable. Once great cities were hollow ruins, illuminated by burning skies. Countless civilians fled the planet entirely. Survivors scavenged ancient ruins for scraps of energon, while warships battled overhead. Even Optimus Prime began to understand the terrible truth. There would be no real victory, because even if the Autobots defeated Megatron, there might be nothing left to save. But perhaps the most disturbing part of the Cybertronian War was not the physical destruction, it was the psychological damage. Imagine fighting for millions of years. Imagine witnessing endless death for so long that violence becomes normal. Entire Transformers lost their sense of identity beneath the constant warfare. Soldiers became machines built only for combat. Trauma consumed countless survivors. Ratchet, for example, is often portrayed as deeply scarred by the war. Beneath his sarcasm and exhaustion lies a medic who spent millions of years watching Cybertronians die around him. Ultra Magnus became consumed by duty and military structure because order was the only thing holding the Autobots together. Megatron himself transformed from revolutionary into tyrant. The longer the war continued, the more his original ideals decayed beneath hatred and obsession. And Optimus Prime carried perhaps the greatest burden of all, because every Autobot death became his responsibility. That emotional weight is one of the reasons Optimus remains such a powerful character. He is not simply a heroic leader. He is a survivor of an endless apocalypse, trying desperately to preserve hope in a universe collapsing around him. But even hope has limits. Eventually, Cybertron itself fell. Different continuities portray this differently, but the result is often the same. The planet becomes uninhabitable. The Transformers scatter across the galaxy searching for energon, refuge, and survival. Ancient colonies are rediscovered. New wars erupt across distant stars. The conflict spreads beyond Cybertron. Earth eventually becomes one of the next battlegrounds, and that is what makes the Cybertronian War so terrifying compared to most fictional conflicts. It never truly ends. Even after millions of years, Autobots and Decepticons continue fighting because war has become embedded into their existence. Entire generations are born into conflict without understanding the original cause. Revenge replaces ideology. Survival replaces morality. In many ways, the Cybertronian War mirrors humanity's darkest historical conflicts. Revolutions become dictatorships. Justice becomes extremism. Fear creates militarization. And eventually, nobody remembers how the violence truly began. That is the tragedy of Transformers. At its core, Transformers is not just a story about giant robots fighting each other. It is a story about the collapse of a civilization. A species with unimaginable technological advancement destroyed itself through endless hatred, political corruption, and war without limits. The Autobots and Decepticons became trapped in a cycle so destructive that even victory became meaningless. And perhaps that is the darkest truth of all. Neither side truly won the Cybertronian War, because by the end, Cybertron was gone. The cities were dead, the people were scattered, and the survivors carried scars that would never heal. For millions of years, the Transformers fought, believing they were saving their world. But in the end, the war itself destroyed it. The Cybertronian War was never just a battle between Autobots and Decepticons. It was the slow death of an entire civilization. A conflict so massive that even the greatest machine race in the universe could not survive it unchanged. And maybe that's what makes Transformers so timeless. Beneath the giant robots, the explosions, and the wars across the stars, lies a story about power, corruption, survival, and the cost of endless conflict. Because in the end, neither side truly won. Cybertron paid the price. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the brutal scale of the Cybertronian War, make sure to subscribe for more dark Transformers lore, cinematic breakdowns, and deep dives into the hidden history of Cybertron. And let me know in the comments, who do you think was truly responsible for the fall of Cybertron? Megatron, the Autobots, or Cybertron's corrupt system itself? Until all are one.